Welcome to Rick's Scale Model Fix and part 2 of the Airfix 1/48 scale Carriage Sabre F4 build. At the back of the last video we managed to get the fuselage halves together and the fuselage is sat there drying. In the meantime work can continue and we can build up the wing section. So Airfix have given you the option of having the undercarriage down or retracted in flight or on the ground, and as such you would need to choose which of the parts that you need to make up the undercarriage bay. So they give you the one piece complete doors, or you start adding detail to the lower wing section. So looking at the lower wing section, there's some horrendous ejector pin marks in there. Hopefully nothing will interfere with the fit as we go through the build. The flaps are solid pieces and we have got some sink marks in the plastic there from the detail. Or is it just the fact that it's such a thick piece of plastic? As it's cooled it's shrunk a little bit. Anyway, not to worry about those, we'll deal with those when we get primer on it. So we need parts C62 and C63 and we need to open up these holes for the underwing pylons. So it's saying drill bit 2.3mm, so we'll crack on with that. So not having a drill as big as 0.23mm, we're just going to open these with a 1mm bit. And then open them up with this tool that I got from eBay cheap. It just makes those holes the correct size. It's tapered and as you push it through it's a file and it just makes the holes the correct size with no effort. Like so. They're quite substantial mounting pins, so we'll just cut the raised bit of plastic off on the outside and we'll repeat it for now for the other side. So just getting it as in the centre as I can, drilling through. And then opening up to the correct diameter. Like so. And again we'll just remove the plastic from the other side. So that's the first test done. We need to add the start of the undercarriage bay now, so we'll be looking at parts C62 and C63. So we've got parts C62, so we're just going to trim these up, remove the sprue attachment points, and these go into this part here. So the rear wall of the main landing gear bay. Repeat for the other side. So looking at the next stage, we need to start building up the main gear well, which looks quite nicely detailed. So we've got two parts there, B28 and B27, and it's saying that you need to clean out and file the holes if you're having the undercarriage doors open. So let's have a look at B28. So I've got B28 off the sprue now. And we'll just again clean up those attachment points. Hopefully the camera can pick those up. So we're just going to cut those off. And I don't think we need to do any more than that. The plastic's quite soft, so it does cut easily. Right, so. And then this goes on to part B27. And yet again we've got more of that strange blue compound. So we've got the holes there, and this sitting in like that. Stage 44 already, and we can see with the instruction books that it's highlighted the parts we've already placed, and we're going to now cement this in place on the wing to complete the main gear bay, and it doesn't look too bad once in there. So it does want to move around a little bit, so we'll just make sure everything's lined up accordingly before we add our glue. So when viewed from the inside it does look quite good, but from viewed from the outside looking in, so as you can see, Airfix have left the leading edge of the wing as a separate part on the underside, meaning that they can portray different types of wings fitted to the Sabres. So we'll just get some glue onto these. Hopefully everything is going to fit perfectly, not like the fuselage. Which was took a bit of patience to get that together, but it went together in the end. It's sat to one side drying, looking at me as we speak. So I'll carry on building this wing up, and join me when we're ready to attach it to the fuselage. So we're ready to add the wings to the Sabre, and the fit at the rear is pretty good. So what we'll do is we'll just tape that in place, and then the fit at the front is tight, but it all goes in. We've got a little bit of a gap that'll need to be pulled tight, but more importantly the wing roots are fairly good. We've got a little bit of a gap at this wing, which you can rub a bit of Mr. Surfacer in there. So to close the gap up at the leading edges, what I did is I put a spreader bar in there, just like so, made out of a cocktail stick. So we'll set about gluing this in place now. So we're going to just do this rear end first because it fits quite good, and then we'll get that tape back on. So we'll just guide that into place. So we're just holding it while the glue bites. Making sure everything's lined up. I'll get a bit of Tamiya tape on there, just to hold it all secure. And then we'll click this front end into place. again, once we make sure that the wing roots are fine and everything's lined up, we'll add some more glue. Good helping. And then we're going to squeeze this area together. With a bit of tape, quickly before it pings back out. This one's still having a tendency, I don't know if you can see, it's still having a tendency just to not want to sit, but the flaps are in the right place. Probably tease this open a little bit. Just to raise it up. There we go, and that's it. We can run a bit of Mr. Surfacer in there just to hold everything in place. So I'm just going to put a quick line of cement in. So we're just letting the glue bite, and once it bites, and we'll relax the fit, and everything should be fantastic. So we've got a bit of clean up to do. I've test fitted the nose intake ring, and that's not a bad fit, which means that we got fuselage in the right sort of places. Just going to need a bit of blending in, but nothing too major. And we put the drop-in panel on the spine and the part of the tail, so it's starting to look like a Sabre. We're at that point in construction now where the major airframe is assembled and everything is glued and stuck together that we want to add to the model, and it's time to get some primer on and just see what our build quality is like, and check the seams and stuff like that to make sure there's no glaring errors that are going to show through the top colour coats of paint. So the first job is to protect the painted areas that we don't want to get any overspray on, such as the intake, cockpit and jet exhaust. So for the intake and jet exhaust, we're going to use some of this foam that comes in resin accessory packs, and we're just going to push that down the opening for the intake. So we just want it to go as far as the join with the intake trunking and the intake ring, and that should sit in there quite nicely and protect that aluminium finish that we applied right back in stage 1. At the other end we've got the jet exhaust, so we're just going to push this up the jet pipe, and again we're just going to sit it just inside like so. Cockpit we're going to do in a more traditional way with masking tape, so we're going to put a piece straight over the top. I'm just going to burnish that down. So we're just covering that rear decking, and then we're just going to run knife blade just around the outline, just protect that area. Doesn't have to be perfect at this stage. we can work that in. Cocktail stick. I'm just going to pull it along the side of the fuselage. I think we'll cut that off there. So we're just making sure that that cockpit aperture is masked and that we're not going to get any overspray into the cockpit itself. Use various widths of masking tape just to make sure that you've got a good seal. So I'm just going to put some more around the canopy sill. Probably use 6mm just to tidy it all up. So we're going to use AK primer and microfiller. This is cut down with Mr. Colour leveling thinner. I wait until there's about 1/3 of a bottle used and then top it up back up to the top. And we're going to apply that with airbrush. So I'll come back to you when that is now applied and we can have a look at the results we've achieved and see how good those seams were and the filling and sanding that we did back in part 1 and 2. So we're fresh out the spray booth and we've got the Sabre in primer. So it's refreshing to see that a lot of the work that I did back in stage 1 has paid dividends. So there's that panel. Whilst it's not the best fit, once it's under a coat of paint it should look a lot better. There's the other side. Fuselage seams and everything are fine and all that work has paid off. We've just got a bit of a faint panel line at that rear end which is going to need a bit more filler and priming, and I think again the same with this spine. I'm just going to spray some Mr. Surfacer over it. I'm going to mask these panel lines off and then just buff that up. But the drop-in panels and the insert round the spine is certainly up to standard, and the wingtip fits and everything are good. We've got a few sink marks in those and the underside is generally pleasing as well. So what we'll do with that is we'll let that fully dry and then I shall polish the surface up, do some sanding and corrective remedial work where needed, and we can think about getting the camouflage colours on. So just to take care of these little ghosty type seams, we've masked off the area and we've mixed up a concoction of Mr. Surfacer and lacquer thinners, and we're just going to gently build this up to about the thickness of the masking tape. Just slow passes, just watching all the time just to build it up. We want, like I said, we want it about the thickness of the masking tape. And we're now going to leave that a considerable amount of time just to dry. So as you can see, we shall have an area of Mr. Surfacer that we can then just very lightly sand back to cover the imperfections in those seams lines where we did all that work. So it's just time to think ahead slightly while we're waiting for that Mr. Surfacer to dry. There's always something to do during the project. So we're going to turn our attention to the colour scheme. My original intention was to do a 3-squadron aircraft, which is the primary scheme in the kit. Unfortunately I haven't got any Humbrol number 2 gloss emerald. It's going to be a bit tricky at the moment just to pick up a single tin of green paint online. The postage costs would be silly. So I've decided to do the less colourful but nonetheless still interesting number 4 Squadron Sabre. And that'll actually complement my earlier build this year of the 4 Squadron Harrier. So there's just a note here. It says that RAF Sabres would appear to have solely carried the 100-gallon drop tank. Ongoing research can find no evidence of the larger 166-gallon tanks being used in RAF service. It then goes on to say that XB812 at RAF Cosford Museum is fitted with the such, but it may not be entirely accurate. So I'm going to go with the smaller tanks in the kit, so we can build those up, and they're multi-part items. So we're going into instruction booklet, and we're jumping in at stage 80. So we've got these tanks together. They were primed at the same time as the model, and we just need to put the fins and bits and pieces on these now. So we're just going to add these fins to the drop tank, so we just need to push them in slightly. Don't forget they have got downward slope. They're a bit of a loose fit. And we're going to need a bit of fill around, a bit of Mr. Surface around the ends. What we get there. And there's one. Trusty old piece of foam just to hold them. And the other one, I'll just clean these up. These are a little bit tighter fit. Set those aside to dry. So carrying on with some of the smaller assemblies while we're waiting for that fuselage to dry still, and we've just joined the wheel halves together. So there's the main gear one. Yeah, they come in 2 sections, pretty standard. Different types are included in the kit, so make sure you get the right ones. And they've got slightly different alignment pins than normally seen. And they've got a good sort of crescent shape peg that fits into a recess on the opposite side. Fiddly. And they align up quite well. There's no tyre tread detail on these, they're just slick. Nice bead of extra thin just to hold them together, and we'll clean the making sure they're round, and we'll clean those sprue gates up once everything's dry. So that's another quick win. So another quick job just to mask the canopies off as we are entering sort of the painting stages next. So these can be tacked in place with a little PVA. Brand new blade, and as you can see we've just traced the outline in pencil. Very light pressure on the blade just to follow the pencil lines. Tearing away or removing the outside part, just checking that everything is lined up. can repeat that. So I tend to try and find a straight edge, which in this one's the bottom. Push it down. Cocktail stick up against the framework just to burnish everything down. And then the pencil just to help the vision. So if you hold it against the framework, it's quite easy to produce. And then we just cut along the line. And making sure you just get right into the corners for when you need to remove the unused part of the mask. Like so. I'll do the same now for the other side. Then with the pencil to define the line. Unfortunately for this kit, the framework is quite well pronounced, so it gives us a nice sort of raised area to work with, which makes the masking a little bit easier. Just using the very tip of the blade, just enough pressure to go through the tape. So I'll mask up the sliding section, which is going to be slightly easier because it's long straight lines. Another productive session at the workbench with Airfix's brand new 1/48 scale Carriage Sabre F4. Just off camera I managed to mask up and spray some Mr. Surfacer onto those areas of concern on the underneath and the spine. The spine needs a little bit more work. I've just got a slight sort of ridge in the paintwork there from where the masking tape was with the Mr. Surfacer, so I just need to take that out. That's a 2-minute job. Now the undersurface is done and it just needs polishing up to match the rest of the surface. We've got the drop tanks built up, wheels and the canopies masked. So thank you for following along in part 2. Hopefully you'll join me in part 3 where we look at getting the camouflage on the jet. So until then, please look after yourselves, stay well and take care.